So a little bit about myself. Went through this whole process a long time ago. Grew up in Chicago, played junior golf there, ended up attending Indiana University on a golf scholarship, which is part of the Big Ten, and now Big 18 or 19, however many teams they have. Um, but played professionally for a little while after that, and then the last 7, 8 years have turned my focus to golf instruction with a heavy focus on juniors that are trying to play golf at the next level. So juniors that are looking to play golf in college. And one of the things that I realized, quickly after starting was how important going about the recruiting process was. It was a lot more competitive than when I went through the process myself, when I was a junior golfer. Um, and so, realized quickly that, recruiting needed to be a full-time focus the same way that you'd have, someone to work on your swing, the same way you have somebody for fitness, and the same way you'd have somebody for mental game, right? We need to attack recruiting with a full focus as well. And so that's where Joe and I started Athlos College Coaching. So it's just full-time focus on giving you the best chance of having success with your recruiting process. Joe previously was at ESPN for 10 years, the latter half of which he was on the Monday Night Football truck. And during his time there, he won an Emmy for his work with the Monday Night Football team there. So pretty cool to have an Emmy winner with us tonight. And, since we started Athlos 4 years ago, Joe's led dozens of kids through this process, so together you're looking at the only two employees of Athlos College Coaching. So it's just myself and Joe.
Yeah. So, but Brad, I got to stop you. I knew you were going to do this. Please read what's on the screen. Brad is just so humble. I wrote this. He made the cut at the 2021 PGA Championship, and he played at the 2024 PGA Championship this year at Valhalla. So he's too humble to say that, but I'm going to call that out. So anything he says for the junior golfers listening, watching tonight, please listen to him. He does know what he's talking about. I promise you. And just for a little more background about us, we're in Northern California. I live in San Francisco. Brad lives in Berkeley, and we do partner with the SCPGA Junior Tour. We were down there for an event a couple months ago, which was great. So again, great to see you all this evening, and great to see so many people interested in the recruiting process. And I want to thank those who took the time to fill out that registration form and ask a question. What are you most interested in the recruiting process? And when we went through those questions, it really seemed like there were three big themes that you all had, which was basically, what is the recruiting process? When does the process begin? And how do I get recruited? Those are the three big themes that we're going to tackle tonight. And a lot of you also mentioned the goal that you had, which for many of you was D1 golf. And these are a few of our students who were fortunate enough to commit and currently be playing for a D1 golf team, some of them Ivy League. And that's great. We're very proud of those students. Certainly, they worked very hard. But tonight, we're not just going to talk about the D1 route. We're going to give you some tools that will help no matter what colleges you're targeting in this recruiting process. Brad?
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. So first, what is the recruiting process? And so this is kind of a 10,000-foot overview of what it entails. Obviously, you've got to be working on the golfing side of things on your end, but what we help you with is first step of this is building a list of colleges. And a lot of people might think, oh, this will be 10, 12, 15 schools. Well, where we've had the most success, and if you're really doing this the right way, I mean, this list might be upwards of 50 schools. We've had students with 60 plus schools on this list. This gives you, a lot of schools in a different variety of ranges. Some might be reach schools, some might be more safety schools, but then there's going to be a lot of them on there that you're going to be really interested in that are also very achievable schools. There might be a range of, academic how good the university is as an academic institution as well. After we build this list, this communication process, the recruiting process starts by you reaching out to these coaches via email. So as you might expect, these coaches get a ton of emails. You look at a strong Division I team, their coach might get 50, 60, 70 emails a day when they're in the busy part of their recruiting process. That's a lot. So we've got to do, how do we make an email, catchy? How do we get a coach to open that email? But then also, how do we convey a lot of main important points in a short number of words, right? Because their coach is not going to read a 2-page email. They're just not going to do it. So we got to get our point across quickly and efficiently. Next, after you've sent emails, communicated a little bit with coaches, we're going to move to phone calls, texting with coaches. How do you handle that process? How do you handle these phone calls with coaches? What are they looking to hear? What are you expecting to hear? What types of questions should you have for these coaches? And what types of questions should you expect to hear from them? I mean, this is all key because you're going to start building this relationship with them on the phone and not in person. So, build a list of schools, write emails, then eventually those emails move to phone calls and text messages. Eventually, you'll start taking campus visits if we go about this process the right way. Hopefully, you have a number of schools that are interested in having you on campus to see the facilities, to meet them in person. And then after we do that, hopefully we get offers and we have more than one so that we have, options. If we do this process the right way, at the end of it, you should have, multiple schools that you're interested in that would all be a pretty good fit. And you're just deciding between very good fits to find that best fit for you and your family as your college option.
And before we move on to this next slide here, we've already had one question come through on direct message, so please keep those coming. We were going to probably address all of those questions near the end of this presentation, but certainly write the questions in the chat as they come up. We will try to answer all of them.
Thanks, Joe. So when does this recruiting process begin? Pretty much if you're on here, we saw all the ages of the people that were on this Zoom, pretty much begins now. Because even if you're in middle school, we have to be going about tournament golf the right way. So making sure that we're playing in tournaments, making sure that we've found a coach that we really like, that we can, use to help us along this journey. And we got to be having fun. If we remember nothing else from this Zoom, if you're able to have fun, you're going to enjoy this. If it's enjoyable for you to go practice, enjoyable for you to go play tournaments, you're going to get better because you're going to be more passionate about it and you're going to spend more time out there, and that time is going to be more engaging. For you freshmen and sophomores that are on here tonight, our goal tonight is really to learn about this process. So, what all does it entail? When do I need to start? What's a good goal for me depending on, my year in high school? And then for freshmen and sophomores as well, we want to start doing a little bit of research on schools. So, which area of the country are we interested in? Are we looking for big school, small school? What do we think is going to be, likely a good fit for you? And then start sending those emails. So freshman year, not as important, but certainly by the time you're a sophomore, we've got to start that email communication with these coaches. And then for juniors and seniors, if you haven't started this process, we got to start now. And again, it's going to start with emails. And then after those emails, we're going to follow up with more emails. So that's, if you're already in your junior year, we're probably just a little bit behind. And especially if you're a senior that's down here tonight, you're definitely behind in this process. And, before you fall way too far behind, we got to start sending emails, build that list and start sending emails out to these coaches.
Absolutely, Brad. And so we've talked about the what, the when, how do I get recruited? Why would a coach recruit me? Coaches are looking for three things to determine whether or not they're going to offer somebody. The first is golf, right? Obviously, you're golfers. You want to play college golf. So coach is going to look at you as a golfer. Notice we're not saying your average score or your handicap because there are a lot of things that coaches look at in addition to your average score or your junior golf scoreboard rank. They're looking at, do you have a lot of potential? Like, have you had some great rounds? Have you played well in big tournaments? Perhaps most importantly, are you showing a lot of improvement in recent months that they think is going to continue? So it's not just your average score. You're more than your average score. Try to communicate any highlights, any improvements that you've made to show coach that, hey, I'm not a finished product here. I'm going to be playing my best golf for you when I'm in college. All right. The second piece, this as equally as important as your golf, is your academics. I cannot overstate how important getting good grades in school is for playing college golf. That's because we're not football players, right? If you're a football player, you're the best in the country, and you have a 2.1 GPA, Stanford football is going to take you, right? UCLA football is going to take you. They're going to figure out a way to get you in. Not the case with golf. We have to be a good academic fit for the institution to which we're trying to play golf at. Okay. So if you have amazing grades, you're opening up all these golf possibilities for yourself that wouldn't exist if you didn't have good grades. So one of the best things you can do to play college golf is to do well in school. The other piece, some of you asked about scholarships when you reached out online and registered for this session. So yes, you can get athletic scholarships. Division I and Division II schools can give out athletic scholarships. They don't have to, but they can. But you can also get academic scholarships. Academic scholarships come about if you're a really good student. And so the coach can talk to the admissions department, and the admissions department can communicate, yes, if you commit here, if you come here, you can get $20,000, $30,000 a year, whatever it is, because of how strong you are as a student. So you are incentivized in multiple ways to be a great student. The third piece of this is your story. So you're not a robot that just has an average golf score and an average GPA. You're more than that. You have a story. So when we're emailing coaches, how do we communicate our story? For instance, is there something unique about you, something that stands out? Maybe you're a multi-sport athlete who started golf very late and just decided that you fell in love with it. Maybe you've overcome a major challenge in your life, and that explains maybe why you're coming to this a little bit late. Your scores aren't where the coach might like. What can you communicate about yourself that's unique, that will stand out amidst, as Brad said, the 50, 60, 70 other people emailing that day? And how well can you manage the recruiting process, right? At the end of the day, the goal is to be on a very small college golf team, 9, 10, 11 players. You're going to be on a lot of long van rides, long bus rides, long plane rides with the coach. The coach wants to like you. They want to get along with you. And so if you're communicating the best of yourself and putting your best foot forward in this process, it's going to tell the coach, hey, I want to have this person on my team. I want to be around this person for 4 years. So those are the three key components that coaches look for when determining who to offer.
So next, and Joe and I really don't like to talk about this, but we always get so many questions about this that we feel the need to put this slide in here to kind of lessen the amount of questions about this. But again, by no means is this set in stone. We have, people that have committed to Division I schools who have, on the guys side, who average in around 74, okay? But we're going to go through these benchmarks here. So we'll start on the girls' side. So for your lower level Division II and Division III teams, if you're shooting in the 80s, that's likely good enough for a lot of those schools. As you move on the women's side to those lower level Division I programs, and again, there's over 300 Division I, programs, your elite D2 and your elite D3, we probably need to be targeting below 78. And then those top Division I schools on the women's side, try to get it below 73. And then over on the guys' side, the average scores in general are a little bit lower. So for the Division II and Division III, those lower levels, high 70s is likely good enough to play at a lot of those schools. As we move into the lower level Division Is and your best Division II and Division III teams, that scoring average likely needs to be below 75. And then finally, your elite level Division I programs. So your Oklahoma State, Arizona State, Duke, things like that. We need to average below 71. But again, we need to take all this with a grain of salt. These are rough averages. And also, just because you're averaging 81 as a sophomore doesn't mean that you can't improve like crazy if you're putting in the right work. So we don't want to, and it's part of that college list that we talked about earlier. We don't want to, pigeonhole ourselves into just this is my bandwidth of schools that I'm able to target. And the same thing, we also don't want to target only elite schools because maybe we just hit a rough patch with our golf game and we don't get better for 9 months or we go through a slump. We got to have schools on there that are, across the spectrum of, reach, in the middle ground, and then safety schools.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, we really do want to emphasize this is one of the least important slides in this deck, truly, because these are very rough estimates. There are hundreds of programs on both sides, so we're just trying to do our best to estimate here. I did get one question, Brad, as a direct message that I want to address immediately from Alex. What would that chart look like for middle schoolers if we had to translate this to where middle schoolers should be?
Basically, the strongest advice I could give you was to not make a chart. Don't think that there's going to be a chart, because there are middle schoolers that, were not very good at golf in middle school that end up being absolute stud golfers by the time they're sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school. And there's also, middle schoolers that are, finishing at the top of U.S. kids golf and already having success at the state level, who, are not very good as a junior in high school. So there's no, have fun with the process, try to get better, make your goal to get better at golf, no matter where you're at in middle school, and you never know how quickly you can improve. One of my favorite stories as a coach was, I had a kid that couldn't break 100 as a freshman, and honestly, even early sophomore year struggled to break 100, and he ended up playing college golf. So at one of the best academic institutions in the country. So, anything is possible in terms of improvement and when that comes. So really don't think in terms of, average score at a certain age, because there's no telling how quickly you can improve.
Right. Compare yourself to yourself, not the numbers on this chart. Are you getting better? That's what's important. And that kind of leads us into our keys to success here. This is a slide that tries to put a lot of these lessons just in one place here. But if you're going to have success in the recruiting process, we want you to think about these things. The most important thing, understand that in this process, you are recruiting the coach. The coach is not recruiting you. I know that sounds wild, but you're recruiting the coach is not recruiting you. Juniors and seniors on this Zoom, we know you can agree with that statement that your phone did not start ringing off the hook when you started your junior year, right? You have to go to the coaches, present yourself, show who you are, email, email, email. They are waiting for you to come to them. They are not going to come to you unless you're top 50, top 60 in your graduating class. Okay. That means there's going to be work in this process, but it also gives an opportunity, because if you know how to navigate the recruiting process, then you are going to have a huge advantage on people who have the same scores and the same grades as you, because you understand I got to go after these coaches, not the other way around. The second thing, be open-minded. If you say, hey, I want to play college golf at UCLA, that's where I want to be. Well, there's a chance, right? People play at UCLA every year, right? But we've narrowed down hundreds of potential options to one extremely selective option. So what we encourage you to do, be open-minded. Understand that there is hundreds of programs, D1, D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO, so many opportunities out there for you. And we can tell you, people who go D1, D2, D3, they all have fun. College golf is great at every level, so be open-minded. Working hard is important, obviously. Keep working hard in school, golf, and recruiting. If you do these things, you understand that you're going to coaches, they're not coming to you, you're open-minded, and you work hard, college golf is very possible. People only think about 20 programs when they're thinking about college golf. There's 700 women's NCAA programs, 800 men's NCAA programs. College golf is possible if you follow and remember these things. We want to talk a little bit more, because we get questions about this, about kind of what we do, how we help juniors through this process, because we partner with the SCPGA Junior Tour. We want to share a little bit about what we do to help golfers like yourselves through this process.
Yeah, so we have, depending on where you are in this process, we have services for every age. So when you're in middle school, the most important thing and the best way that we're able to help you is figuring out what's going to be the best tournament schedule for you. So what's going to be, the right amount of tournaments, what's going to be the right level of those tournaments, are we traveling a lot for this? Are we not? But coming up with a schedule that makes sense, depending on where you are in this golf journey. For freshmen and sophomores, one of the things that we started last year and had a lot of success with was the Athlos Seminar Series. So this is a lot like tonight, but obviously with a much smaller group, but it's done via Zoom. And we go step by step for 9 months to really dive into this recruiting process. So how, we talked about building a college list. So how do we do that? So we'll take you through that. We told you how, the first step is sending an email to these coaches. Well, what's in that email? How do I get these coaches' emails? What's going to be a good way to talk about my game in an email? These are all things and many more that we talk about in this seminar series. And what we do with that seminar series is that gives you a great baseline for understanding what you need to be doing with your recruiting process. And it gets you, out the door running on this process. And if you're doing it the right way with us in that, you're in a great spot come the end of this seminar series in May. So that's starting in October and will run for the next 8 or 9 months. Kind of just like this over Zoom, able to ask as many questions as you want, get feedback on what you've been doing in the recruiting process. Yeah, and it's just a fun Zoom hour long about every month for the next 8 or 9 months. And then finally, for the juniors and seniors, and this is kind of the bulk of our service, but we work one-on-one with families and juniors going through the recruiting process. So it's a Zoom about every 2 weeks, and then communication in between those Zooms. So making sure that we're sending emails to these coaches. If you got replies from the coaches, well, how are you responding to this? Hey, a coach asked this question and I don't really know how to respond. So we'll talk through, how you're going to handle that situation. We'll take you through mock coach calls before you're going to have a phone call with an important school. So you're going to learn what to expect from, a coach on the phone. How are we going to schedule visits? All kind of things like that. So we take you through that whole process, and that's the Athlos private client service. So typically best served for, people end of sophomore year, junior year, and senior year.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. I'm going to spend one more minute on the seminar series because we are starting it officially next month. Again, this is particularly for freshmen and sophomores. So class of 2028, class of 2027. Brad gave you some details. The membership cost is $12.50, one-time cost. What we do is after every session, we record it and we post the session on a password protected page. So you have those tools forever in the recruiting process. As Brad mentioned, next month is going to be assembling your list of colleges. So how do we put together a list of 60 schools? That's not just 3 or 4, Stanford, UCLA, USC, right? How do we do 50 to 60 schools? And then in November, we're going to write an intro email together to college coaches. We had a few families say some nice things about the last year's version of the seminar series, which we appreciate. And if you have any questions about it, we have a parent who volunteered to be a reference for you all who went through it last year. So please reach out about the seminar series. Again, we think it's an excellent tool for freshmen and sophomores who don't need to be sending emails every week, but should start the recruiting process. One more note, we're really excited to announce that for the first time, we are going to offer a scholarship. So if you are interested in the seminar series and you're an SCPGA Junior Tour member, email me. This email address, your subject line should be scholarship applicant. In the email, introduce yourself, write 100 to 200 words on each of the following. Why do you want to play college golf? How would this scholarship help you? We're going to choose one SCPGA Junior Tour member who will get a free seminar series scholarship. You'll have access to the series for free for the entire session. Those emails are due by October 3rd. So again, we hope to see you there. We had a great seminar series last year. Small group, it'll be fewer than 20 people. So you really will be able to feel like you're getting all of your questions answered in that process. So the seminar series in a lot of ways is the start of the process for so many of you. And the end of the process looks like this.
So these are a lot of students that we've worked with in the last 3 years and where they ended up. So you can see on this slide, right, we've got Pepperdine on the upper left, we got Yale next to that. But then on here, there's also some schools that you might not have heard of before. Dominican, which is up in the Bay Area, they're a smaller D2 school. Things like that. North Carolina A&T, it's out east, obviously, North Carolina. So there's a lot of variety to these schools. There's a lot of Division I, but there's also a lot of Division II and Division III schools on this list as well. And the thing that's really cool about this is that all these kids were very happy with their decision. Like they ultimately landed on a school that was a good fit for them. Because Division I golf, college golf does not have to be Division I golf. There's a lot of fun. There's a lot of great tournaments. You travel to a lot of cool places, playing Division III and Division II golf, if you're going about this process the right way. But yeah, we've been very happy, to have the success we've had with these students. But, these students are the ones that put in the hard work, right? We're not doing the work for you. We're showing you, kind of best practices of how to send emails, how to build lists. But this is these students that went out and did the work. And just like you go work on your putting, you work on your short game, things like that. We've got to work on the recruiting process as well. You've spent all this time getting your golf game to this point that we've got to be smart about how we handle the recruiting process as well.
No question. I mean, I think Kyler is top 30 nationally in his class. We were still sending emails, right? We weren't just sitting there and hoping that college coaches were going to reach out to him. So, it's something that he was doing. He put work in, even though he's one of the better players in 2026 in the nation. But hey, if you put that work in, you can get an awesome result. And we'll tell you, our students who are in college, starting their freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, they're loving it. I mean, what a cool end result playing college golf. So we're going to hang on this slide for a second here. Um, I'm going to challenge every student athlete on this Zoom right now. I want you to pretend that you're on a phone call with the college coach, because that's going to happen if you go through the recruiting process. And at the end of that call, the coach is going to say, "What questions do you have for me?" And it's going to be very awkward if you don't ask a single question. So we'll challenge you right now. Every single student athlete that's on this Zoom, write a question in the chat, because we've gotten some great questions and we're about to start going through them, but we want more questions. So pretend it's a college coach that just asked you, "What questions do you have for me?" All right. So Brad, first question from Alex. When you say email coaches, when? What grade?
Um, Ideally, probably sophomore year would be when, I think, what we found is that any earlier than that, and your time could probably be better spent practicing, maybe, working a little bit more on short game and putting. But if you're starting to send emails, start a sophomore year or going into sophomore year, that tends to be the sweet spot for when to start. Even if you're looking at like a Division 3 level, it's just not going to hurt you to start earlier. um, Coaches, whether they're responding or not, coaches are filing these emails away, and they will be reading them at some point. So it really helps frame, how your path is going as a golfer. So, if they can read, a chain of emails that started 9 months ago, and they can see the improvement you made over that time, it's a pretty cool thing to see.
And if your goal is Division 1, those coaches typically recruit earlier. So we recommend reaching out even earlier than that, freshman year. So freshman, sophomore year, middle school's too early. Next question. 2026 D3, when do we need to contact coaches? So junior looking to play D3 golf.
Yeah, now. Now, ideally, we would have started that earlier, but especially now, like start building a list of schools. These coaches are kind of in a sprint here for their fall season, but that fall season for most of them ends, a little over a month from now, and so they have, really a window after the fall season before the spring season starts where they can spend a little bit more time on recruiting. So, I would be as soon as possible.
Right. Yeah. And that's why we set up the seminar series to work on emails in November, because you got to think about the college golf calendar. Coaches are more likely to read emails when they're in their off season. So in between the fall and spring seasons, in between the spring and fall seasons. So you can send emails now. That's great. You should. But especially when that fall season ends, November, December, January, we need to be sending emails to coaches. Brad, this is from Ed. What types of courses/degrees can a student athlete go into while playing for their school?
Um, all depends on the school. So this is part of doing your research, and this is part of the conversations you'd have with coaches. If you're dead set on a major, like if you're going to be a biology major and you want to do that, those stuff like that tends to have a lot of labs that tend to be at very set times of day. So this is something, you have to communicate with these coaches, but it all varies, school to school. So with that, that's why the process, needs to start earlier if you're going after a Division 1 school, or, particularly if you know what major that you definitely want to do, because not every major at every school is going to be a fit. But we can promise you that almost every major is doable. You just have to find the right school for it, that would be able to accommodate that with golf.
Okay. Next, we're getting some questions here, Brad. This is awesome. Let's see what would be next here. How do we get D1 coaches' emails and contacts?
So those are, pretty readily available if you just go to a school's website. Coach contact info is going to be on, if you go to the USC, golf page, you'll be able to get the email of the coach.
Should we send swing and tournament videos?
Um, s- yes, eventually you're going to take some swing videos, but it's sending them with an email can sometimes be tough. Um, we'd much, the very overwhelming majority of students we work with, as long as their parents okay with it, have a way to, usually start a golf Instagram page. So, housing those swing videos on Instagram, some of the tournament highlight videos, that's a lot easier platform than trying to send them via email. And then a lot of coaches do honestly do some recruiting on Instagram as well in terms of reaching out to students.
I'll take this one, Brad, from Jin, excuse me. When should I have an SAT score ready for recruiting? That's a great question. As you all may know, SAT scores for the NCAA are now optional, SAT, ACT, but some individual institutions like a Dartmouth have brought them back as being mandatory. So what we suggest you do is when you have your college list together, the schools you're going after, do some research. Which one of those institutions requires a standardized test score? If none of them do, well, I would not prioritize a standardized test and think unless you think you're going to do extremely well on it. But if some of those schools do require it, then it's something that we would certainly aim for you to take in your junior year, so you can communicate that to coaches.
Joe, just a quick question from Nina, direct message. I was wondering if I would be able to get a copy of this slideshow afterwards.
Yes, yes, Nina, just email me and I'll share the slideshow with you. Uh, Brad from Zeke, what personal characteristics are important to you in a recruit?
Um, some coaches, you're going to hear some different answers from coaches, but again, like Joe mentioned earlier, it's, they're spending 4 and 5 years around you. So, one of the biggest things we hear is like, is this person likable and is this person a good teammate?
Right.
Um, even if you're a really good golfer, if you're tough to get along with, if, you're not a team player, it's really going to set you back in the recruiting process. So, are you coachable? Are you a good teammate?
Are
Are you
you
friendly and like
coachable? Are you teammate?
those would be the biggest ones I would be going after there. And then hard worker, honestly, too, especially at the high levels.
Absolutely. From Ed, what course, degree, or major would go along with playing D1 or D2 golf?
Yeah, I think we kind of answered that earlier. So it just depends on the institution in terms of, what's going to be best fit major depending on the school.
Brad from Andrew, what's the difference between an official and unofficial visit? Actually, I'll just take this quickly. Official means that the school is paying for it. They're typically longer visits. They can pay for as much or as little of the visit as they want, but if they're paying for any, it is an official visit. Official visits are rare on the boys' side, just so you know. I'd say 95% of visits are unofficial. The coach expects you to fly in and stay or drive in and stay on your own dime. Girls, we see a higher percentage of visits that are official visits where the team is paying for you to fly out and stay. So most golf visits unofficial. That just means that you're paying for them yourself. Brad from L, how many players are on the team and how often are practice sessions?
So team size, now this might change here in the coming months, but team size varies, from school to school, but it's typically between about 8 to 12 players per team. Some schools do keep a larger team, but I would say in general in that 8 to 12 range. And then the practice sessions honestly depend a lot on the school too. There's some schools that approach it and coaches approach it where they kind of let the players practice on their own. So there aren't as many, mandatory team practices where everybody on that team is together at once. Other schools, do it a little differently, and almost every practice is a team practice. Now, that's not to say you can't practice more on your own, but they might require you to come to, golf practice as a team 3 or 4 times a week. And then obviously there's qualifying rounds and things like that, that go into the practice side of things as well.
You all might have heard about the new roster caps that's coming to Division One golf. There's still plenty to iron out there, so nothing is set in stone. But it does seem like the men's and women's teams are going to be capped at 9 players starting next year. Again, not set in stone. There's a lot to iron out there. But people often ask, well, what does that mean for me? It doesn't really change the recruiting process for a high schooler that much, but what it means is that this process is more competitive. We did see some big D1 teams in the past. UC Berkeley, the men's team up our way here, always had a huge team, 14 players. And so now they're offering fewer players. There's going to be fewer players on that team. So you don't need to get bogged down in the details of that because there's still stuff to iron out, as I said, but certainly understand that some of the things that have happened recently make this process more competitive for you. Brad, this is from Electrifying. How many hours of practice a day do you recommend?
Um, it's a hard one. I'd say you know, as long as you're able to be engaged and having fun with the practice, there's probably an upward, top end limit of about 3 to 4 hours on that, where you're truly going to be engaged and getting some benefit from the practice. So I would say, and especially as we head into the winter months, I would try to make the hours count, not count the hours. So really be, engaged in what you're doing. Making sure that there's a good variety of how you're practicing. Not everything needs to be a technical thing where you're trying to hit a position with a golf club, or working on a putting drill, right? We can try to, do things where we're trying to putting contests where we're trying to beat our previous best score or trying to hit certain shot shapes on the range. So I would just make sure that the practice quality is high. And especially, it's going to be dark at 5:15 here in a month and a half. So, it really comes down to, getting those hours in after school. There's just not going to be, it's not going to be the opportunity to practice for 4 hours. So make those 2 hours that you do get, or those 90 minutes you do get, count.
Brad, this is from Aldo. What does a day, week, life look like for one of your student athletes? And actually, I'll ask a clarifying question here, Aldo. If you're referring to like an Athlos, the student athlete, it's basically your life right now, playing a lot of golf, working very hard in school, pursuing tournaments. The one wrinkle is now we're adding the recruiting process. What we always say is if you're doing this process the right way, if you're being efficient, you're going to spend about 45 minutes to an hour per week on recruiting. So it's not 5 hours, right? It's not your toughest course in school, but it's also not 5 minutes. And consistency is key. You can't miss 4 weeks in a row and then do 4 hours the next week. Although if you were referring to college players, oh yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're good there. Um, Brad, this is from Andrew, and I'll take this one quickly. Will the 4.5 scholarships move up to 7 or higher in the near future? Yes, you might have heard that the scholarship limit is going to increase from 4.5 to 9. You're referring to 4.5 on the D1 men's side. Just because teams are allowed to offer 9 scholarships, though, doesn't mean that they will. That's an important distinction, right, Brad?
Yeah. Yeah. So even, I mean, there's schools right now, right? There's, 4.5 scholarships on the men's side, 6 on the women's side at the Division 1 level. There's a lot of schools that, they're allowed to give 6 scholarships on the women's side, but there's a lot of schools that do not have the funding for 6 scholarships. So they might be giving out 4.25 scholarships or 3.5 scholarships. And so just because that number increases to 9 does not mean that very many schools will actually be able to go all the way up to 9 scholarships. It would have to be a very well-funded athletic department to be able to achieve that.
From Electrifying. I currently don't have a coach. What should I do?
Um, I would start talking to, I mean, honestly, one of the best ways to figure out who would be a good coach is I'm sure you have some peers, some friends that are also playing junior golf, that live close to you. Ask them who they work with. Do they like them? Are they fun? Are they fun? What areas have they helped you most with? What areas have they helped your friend most with? If you really struggle with short game, but your friend goes to see, a coach that doesn't spend a lot of time on short game, maybe that's not the best fit. So really just asking around. really just asking around and seeing, who people are using, what their experience with them has been.
From Joshua, and I'll take this quickly, Brad. How do I get my questions answered by college coaches if they can't communicate with me until junior year? Well, you could work with us. We'd be very helpful in that process. I'd also say that I want to clarify something. College coaches cannot write you back about recruiting until June 15th after your sophomore year if they're D1 and D2. D3 coaches are bound by no such restriction. So if you're interested in D3 golf, we recommend reaching out before then. We recommend reaching out before then regardless. But understand a D3 coach, if they really like you, they can get back to you during their sophomore year. So we've had students on here who have had phone calls with Division 3 head coaches as sophomores before Division 1 and Division 2 could really reply to them. So keep sending those emails. We promise they are reading those emails. If there's questions that are unanswered, they'll get back to you if they like you when you're a junior. Okay, Brad, this is from Esther. I took a break from tournament play starting in my senior year. I played three 18-hole invitationals for my high school golf season, which started in August. My school always advances to CIF, and I will compete in 2 days during winter break. Will a D3 coach be understanding of my short break?
Potentially, but we've got to start explaining. You've got to start explaining the situation. You can't wait till winter break when you start playing these 2-day tournaments to email these coaches. Um, that's where, Joe talked about, telling your story as part of the recruiting process. I mean, this is where you've got to explain why this happened and what your upcoming plans are. So, but yes, if we sit back and do nothing and don't tell the coaches, not very likely that, very many of them are just going to be reaching out of the blue. So you've got to be proactive in going after them, sending emails, letting them know, how the tournaments in high school season have been going and that you're planning to play a bunch of tournaments over winter break.
Brad from Gin, which GPA would be good for golf schools?
As high as possible. Um, I wouldn't, kind of like the average score, like I wouldn't really be, setting like a target GPA. It's just the better you are in the classroom, the more it's going to set you apart from your peers in this recruiting process. And then the more it opens up, the door on the scholarship side for academic scholarship in addition to athletic aid. And then if we're talking about, Division 3 schools, right, they don't have athletic scholarships. So your only way to help offset the cost of school is through an academic scholarship. So we really want to be pushing grades. And grades also show coaches, that you're able to balance, two things because you're going to have to balance school and golf when you get to school, when you get to college. And so if you're not able to do that in high school, these coaches are going to be pretty concerned that you're not going to be able to do that when you get to college because they're also judged on how their team does in the classroom as well.
Yeah, very well said, Brett. The other thing I'd add is, this is why with the students we work with, both in the seminar series and the private client service, we spend a lot of time putting together the college list with you because you have to have a good match. If you have a 3.3 GPA and nothing wrong with that, those were my high school grades, I think. We shouldn't have a bunch of Ivy Leagues on that list because that's probably not realistic if you're 2 years into high school and you have a 3.3 GPA. Nothing wrong with that. There's 800 other programs. But make sure that you're doing your research on what GPAs each institution really looks for. Okay, Brad, from DP, this is about swing coaches as well. So you addressed that already. Brad from Linda, do most junior golfers get recruited by the end of their sophomore year?
I think hopefully you'll be able to kind of hear the answer to that tonight. But no, like for every, junior that's on here, junior or higher that's on here, junior or older that's on here, how many of you, woke up on June 15th, after your sophomore year, so going into your junior year and had a flood of emails in your inbox? I mean, that's very, very rare. Like Joe said. So we work with Kyler Stone, who's from up here. He committed to go to Pepperdine. And he's won multiple AJGA events, played well in other big events, top 30 or 40 in his recruiting class, and he still had to send emails. So he started getting recruited, but it was a lot of result of what work he put into the process in terms of sending emails prior to the coaches reaching out to him.
Right. So please don't expect that you're going to get a lot from college coaches before you give them a lot of emails. And don't be discouraged by that. Everyone has to send emails. Brad, from Victoria, this is a great question. What if you got ghosted by a college coach of a college you would like to go to?
I mean, keep emailing them until they give you a firm no. I mean, just because a coach didn't respond to an email or two does not mean that they're, automatically not interested. These coaches are very busy. These coaches are very busy. They've got a lot of recruits they're trying to juggle in addition to the team that they already have. So keep reaching out until you get a firm no.
Yeah, exactly. And again, we go back to the college list. Why are we putting together 50, 60 schools instead of 5 or 6? Because, hey, we thought we were in good with this college and now I'm getting ghosted. Okay, it happens. Do you have a backup? Do you have other schools you're talking to? Or are you banking on this school offering you? Well, if you're doing this the right way, you have multiple options. Getting ghosted has happened to pretty much every single one of our students, but they had other options. So make sure you have other options. This is a good question from Matt about practice hours, but I do think you've addressed that, Brad. Um, Good question from Alex for you, Brad. At what age is it better to cut out the other sports? My son is 12 and he's building his body in other sports.
Um, Personal preference, and we hear this from a lot of college coaches, is, the benefit to playing other sports, especially through middle school, maybe even freshman, sophomore year of high school is really high. You play a sport like soccer, basketball, things like that. Like you're learning to be an athlete. You're going to get faster. You're going to get stronger this way, in those sports. I remember a student of mine who's now playing at Cal Poly. I think it was his freshman year. He was swinging at 98 miles an hour when he went into basketball season, November 1. And he came out of basketball season in the middle of March and he was swinging at 110 miles an hour. Um, he grew a little bit in there, but obviously a lot of that was just from strength of, weightlifting they were doing during basketball season and the athleticism that increased. And more, I mean, as we see this game get kind of taken over by speed, these college coaches want athletes first, right? It's really hard to be uber successful at high levels of golf without speed. It's getting increasingly rare. So, specializing in golf is not always the best way to increase your skills as an athlete. And it's also a quick way to, risk burnout. If we take a little bit of time off, it doesn't mean we, have to put the clubs totally down, but, we can build athleticism in other sports.
Yeah, for those of you who have seen Brad on TV, he's 6'6", so he did play basketball in high school as well. So you were a dedicated golfer, Brad, but you still played, if I recall, 2 years of basketball in high school. So even if three, excuse me, I don't know my Brad Merrick trivia very well, but so that doesn't mean even if you're focused on golf that you have to give up every other sport. Okay. I am. Oh, what should I start doing as a sophomore in high school to get recruited? Yeah, great question, Jen. Listen, I hope we've tried to share some information about that tonight between putting together a college list, trying to email coaches, researching some schools. But frankly, we're talking to you for an hour. This is a many hours long conversation. If you are a sophomore in high school, again, we do encourage you to join our seminar series, become a part of that small group, and we will walk you through in detail every step that you need to take to really separate yourself as a high school sophomore. Brad, this is a great question from James. I'm young for my age. I will only be 17 when I graduate high school. Should I consider taking a gap year to increase my tournament stats? If I decide to do a gap year, do I list my graduation year as my gap year and or my high school graduation year?
Yeah, so I'll take the first part, Joe. I'll let you take the second half. But we have seen a couple people have success with a gap year, but just because you're taking a gap year doesn't necessarily mean that coaches are going to be, just because you're technically then a year younger doesn't mean that your recruitment is going to be drastically different the following year. And this is, if you're going to do this the right way, what I would, if you're doing this to target like, 12 or 15 dream schools, I would ask the coaches that you're in contact with, hey, coach, like, if I decide to do this, would I have a chance, as a 2027 or whatever, whatever class is a year later for you. Don't just assume that, a gap year will put you, that much better a year later. I would much, especially with the portal, being easy now, I would consider maybe, going to a smaller school that you really like, and then if golf really improves, maybe transferring from there. But I've seen people take gap years and they're very unstructured years, and coaches are not necessarily big fans of gap years due to that lack of structure. Because those people that come in after a year of non-structured stuff tend to struggle a little bit that first year.
James, as it pertains to the emails, the second part of that question, until you are sure you're taking a gap year, keep communicating your current year, which if you're a senior now is 2025. So you are a 2025 recruit until, unless you determine that you want to be gap year 2026. So stick with 2025 for now. Okay, great. Thank you. Good question. Um, okay. Great question from Esther. At an end of year tournament, like a senior showcase, or any really big event that college coaches are attending, what are college coaches looking for? Reaction to bad shots? Do they take in potential, such as a strong back nine, or is it purely skill in the scorecard?
Yeah. So, a big part of it, the most common refrain you're going to hear from coaches is how you handle adversity and how you treat people. So, if you have a bad hole, right, how do we bounce back from that? If we have a bad round, how do we bounce back from that? What's your attitude after a poor shot? Are you throwing clubs? Are you kicking your bag? Are you doing things like that? Or, are you focused on, getting the best score out of that hole and improving the rest of the way, and fighting through those tough times? And then coaches are also looking at how you treat, the people you're playing with, the rules officials, the people working the tournament, your parents. Uh, if you're kind of rude to your parents, why would the coach expect that you wouldn't, the coach is going to expect you're going to be rude to him. So that's a big, 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 big red flag. And then in terms of what they're looking for in terms of golf, like the coach isn't out there to see, oh, did you shoot 71 today? I mean, the coach can see all the scores you've put on a scoreboard over the last, years on junior golf scoreboard. They're looking for, potential. So, do you have, fast club head speed? Does it look like, your short game's really good? Or does it look like there's a weakness that, he could probably help you improve? So yeah, they're looking at a lot of different stuff, and it just depends on the coach what exactly they're looking for. But first and foremost, attitude, behavior, how you're treating people is going to be much more important than what's actually going on the golf course. The coach knows your skill level by, what you've been shooting. They're out there to see you.
We are approaching 9 o'clock. We know it's a school night. So everyone, if you have more questions, please try to get those in the chat and we'll answer whatever's in the chat in the next few minutes here.
Yeah, Joe, I can group these kind of three together from Jen, Andrew, and Howard here about tournaments.
Great.
So, the tournaments do matter which kind you play. I mean, fortunately for you all, I mean, you guys have one of the best junior tours in the country right in your backyard with SCPGA. So we strongly, strongly advise, even if you're playing at the AJGA level and having success, playing Toyota Tour Cup, any of the other SCPGA Junior Tour offerings, those are great events and generally held on pretty good golf courses as well. So, it's the tournaments have to match up with your goals. If your goal is to attend a top 25, Division I university, yeah, we probably need to throw in some national events, some AJGAs, things like that, in addition to some SCPGA things. But it doesn't mean that SCPGA, doesn't hold value. I mean, coaches want to see you play regularly and they want to see you have success and be able to win. Um, so, and when diving into the question of like, playing tougher fields or playing courses that you can score lower, some of both. Like just, play some of the better stuff. If you're asking this question, I'm hoping you're a little bit better of a player. And, we need a little mix of both. So, don't overthink this though. Like, a lot of parents think that they're the only ones that think they're smart enough to game this ranking system. And coaches know what people are doing when they withdraw from events or, don't play this event because it's on a hard course. Like coaches see this. So just, have fun with it and play. If you like the course, go play it. If we're trying to target Division I schools, yes, go play AJGAs. But we also have people that we've sent to Division I schools that have never played in an AJGA event. Is it super common? No, but it can be. If you have success at your local level and a lot of it, a lot of times that can be good enough as well.
And one add-on here, Brad, from Jin, do you have to be in Toyota Tour Cup to get recruited?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And especially when we're talking about Division II, Division III schools. No, it doesn't have to necessarily be Toyota Tour Cup. There's a lot of good 2-day events down there that are not Toyota Tour Cup.
Question from Beckett. Is there a maximum dollar amount D1 and D2 can offer for a scholarship or an average? Yeah, the maximum dollar amount is a full ride athletic scholarship, which covers tuition plus room and board, which, yes, there is the potential to get that at the D1 and D2 levels. Again, you won't necessarily get that. So don't expect that that's going to be the case. But as you're talking to college coaches later in the process, a question that you should absolutely ask is, what kind of scholarship is available to me here? What are you offering, coach? What am I eligible for? And you'll get a sense. Are you just getting a spot on the team or are you getting a full ride athletic scholarship? So yeah, it can cover everything if you're lucky and you're able to get a full ride athletic scholarship. Okay. Um, okay. We are in the process of deciding where to go for high school because we have a few options. Does the strength of the high school program make a big impact in the recruiting process?
Um, Not necessarily, but what I would say is, playing high school golf has benefits. Um, what I would say, less the strength of the team, if you're looking at those options, like, is one of those coaches, going to be able to help get you better as a player? So I wouldn't necessarily say that just the team being really good would help your recruiting process at all, but like I would just be asking like which coach is going to be able to help me improve the most. At the end of the day, this is about, you improving as a golfer. And so anybody that's going to be able to help you with that, I think I would look at as a positive. And so that's how I would look at that. And then also like from there, it's like we want to also play golf. So if it's a super competitive golf team and you might not be able to play on the varsity team till you're a junior, well, maybe that's not as good as playing, on the varsity team all 4 years.
Great. I'll answer a few of these in rapid fire fashion here. Question about international players versus players from the United States. Look at the rosters of teams you're targeting. Some coaches have found success recruiting from a particular country or group of countries, and you can understand. Okay, this coach recruits regionally, right? It's a North Carolina school. They take everybody from North Carolina and Virginia. Maybe as a Californian, I don't have a great shot, right? So certainly study the rosters of each of these teams. Examples of differences in golf programs as far as benefits to my golfer from school to school. For example, are there great D1, D2, D3 programs? What makes them great? Um, yeah, it's a great question. Unfortunately, I mean, there really are 700 women's NCAA programs, 800 men's. So it's a little bit difficult to answer that question now. I'll say, the school is the most important thing. You're going to school for 4 years. So make sure that the school is a fit. And then secondarily, is the golf program a fit? Do you like the facilities? Do you like the members on the team when you met them? Do you like the coach? Do they play cool events? Do they travel to places you want to travel to, right? All that. But first, it's got to be about the school. So tour the campus as part of this process. Um, Brad, if I have a lot of extracurriculars, is there a way I can show that to college coaches, or does that not matter?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, like Joe said, we're trying to, tell your story of what sets you apart. And if you're able to balance a great golf game, great academics with a lot of extracurriculars, that's going to look great for to a lot of college coaches. So that's something we want to get across in those emails that we're writing to them.
Great. Okay, that's a great way to end it. It's all about your story, and you're writing your story here. College golf is possible. If you're doing this the right way, you can achieve a spot on a college golf team. So, listen, we want to thank you all so much for attending tonight. It was wonderful to see such a great group. We're so grateful to the SCPGA Junior Tour for their partnership with us. We appreciate you all being here. Again, this presentation was recorded. It will be on our website. I will send an email out to all the participants. We really encourage you to think about taking the next step in this process. We would love to help you with this. It's a great process. It's a process that potentially ends with a commitment to a college golf team, but it's a long process. It's complex. We'd love to help with that. Again, if you're a junior, senior, or private client service is great for that. Freshman and sophomore, we'd love to have you in the seminar series that starts next month. So please reach out to me, athlosjoe@gmail.com, to take the next step in your recruiting process. And we thank you all so much for joining us this evening.